I've had a career of 30 years with Defence.
Cheryl Durant rose through the ranks to become one of Australia's most senior military planners.
It's my job to be a cool, calm head.
After a lifetime in the secretive world of defence, she's speaking publicly for the first time since leaving her post as the Director of Preparedness.
If you think of the COVID crisis as a test run, it's highlighted a lot of things that we hadn't thought about, and it's really a critical thing for us to learn from this.
Last year, she commissioned a review of how Defence should prepare for what it concluded was an increasingly likely global crisis.
We saw three main possibilities of that happening. The increasing and escalating effects of climate change and natural disasters, a global power conflict, probably America, China, and finally a pandemic.
At a secret meeting in Melbourne, she gathered 17 leading engineers to wargame whether their industries would survive if the crisis brought global trade to a halt, cutting off their supply chains.
We wanted to understand what was the thing we were most vulnerable in.
We've obtained the confidential report from that meeting. While the group didn't look at pandemics specifically, they predicted Australia would suffer massive upheaval in an unspecified global crisis. And they laid out a timeline for how our essential services would fail in the space of just 3 months. Some of the predictions were eerily accurate. The first prediction was public hoarding, shortages of medicines and medical equipment, and then mass worker layoffs.
We knew there were problems, we knew this might be coming, we knew that various things needed to be done. I would say that our preparedness planning was probably about a D plus C minus, but our response was much better.
A growing group of Australia's top brass has warned for years our reliance on overseas supply chains makes the nation vulnerable in an increasingly unstable world.
We're actually worse off than quite a few countries. All our trade, 98% of our trade, imports, exports, depends upon a foreign-owned shipping system. So we're actually in a pretty fragile position.
The report models a crisis far worse than COVID-19, where global supply chains like shipping routes are severely disrupted, creating a disastrous domino effect. One unforeseen risk was sanitation, which would quickly start to fail because imported water treatment chemicals would run out.
Now you're getting in some nasty consequences because that's also on health and hygiene, and that surprised us. That wasn't something we'd expected.
While nowhere near that worst-case scenario, the water treatment industry is already preparing in case of disruptions to chemical supplies.
When we got first wind of what was happening in China, we were very aware of how that might play out.
The chemicals supplied by this factory in Melbourne are used to treat water in crucial sites across Australia.
From the largest miners in Australia through to all of the major hospitals, the shopping centres, we actually disinfect the water that's coming into the hospital to prevent Legionnaire's disease outbreaks.
Companies like Hydrochem are stockpiling chemicals as the world competes for space on shipping routes.
At the moment, the delays in shipping have meant that what would normally have come in 2 months is taking 4 months.
The COVID crisis has also been a wake-up call for the federal government.
This is an extreme disruption. There are critical items where we need to ensure we've got strong control over the supply chain. These are the things that Australians rely on.
"4:30, wake up, sort of slap myself awake. I'm sort of on the road by about 1:45, 5 o'clock, something like that.
Gavin Stevenson delivers fresh fruit and veg throughout Sydney. According to the report, Australia only has 2 months' worth of fuel.
So I fill up once a week. It's cheaper now than it was. Probably take it for granted that you can just go to a Bowser and fill up, like it's your lifeline. I can't walk these boxes to places.
The federal government last week announced it was buying a stockpile of fuel in the US, which it hopes to one day ship to Australia to keep the country moving in a possible crisis.
The great challenge at the moment is that the world is close to running out of storage for fuel because of demand drops due to COVID-19. We do want to make sure that we have enough fuel in the event of an extreme disruption.
The report predicts that within 3 months there would be no transport. Australia would be racked by social unrest and widespread unemployment. And industries like electricity and telecommunications would be failing because they rely on imported parts. In other words, our nation as we know it would cease to function.
We need to redesign critical parts of our supply chains, and that means it's not only having a capability in Australia to manufacture or produce something, and in those critical areas, you also have to have Australian ownership and or control over critical capabilities. We're smart enough to do something about it, if only we just wake up.
If we take the attitude, I think, as she'll be right, go back to business as usual, bounce back, I think we're going to find ourselves not as well prepared for what happens next.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.